Ethan Miller was the kind of son every mother dreamed of, until the day Sarah discovered he was the reason young women were dying across the state. In a quiet town where nothing ever happened, a mother's world crumbled when she realized the killer everyone feared had been living under her roof all along. Crescent Falls was the kind of town people dreamed of retiring in. Tucked between rolling hills and quiet woods, it was a place where neighbors smiled in passing and kids rode bikes without fear. Crime was nearly unheard of, and the local paper rarely printed anything more serious than a lost dog or a school fundraiser. In the heart of this town lived Sarah Miller, a kind, soft-spoken woman in her late 40s. She worked at the local library and spent her free time tending to her small garden or baking for the church. Sarah's world revolved around her only child, Ethan. He had always been her pride. A quiet, intelligent boy with a love for reading and a talent for drawing. People often said he had an old soul. As a single mother, Sarah poured everything she had into raising him right. Ethan had been accepted into a college 2 states away to study psychology. Sarah was sad to see him go, but proud. He was chasing a future better than hers. When Ethan returned home unexpectedly after his second year, he said college just wasn't for him. He didn't elaborate, and Sarah didn't push. She assumed it was just stress, or maybe a bad experience he wasn't ready to share. What mattered most to her was that he was home and safe. But things began to feel different. Ethan spent long hours in his room, sometimes with the door locked. He took long walks late at night, always returning just before sunrise. Sarah started noticing things out of place, strange stains on his clothes, an old trunk in the garage with a heavy padlock, a pungent chemical smell she couldn't identify. She told herself it was just her imagination. After all, she knew her son. Or at least, she thought she did. The morning started like any other, with soft rain tapping against the windows and Sarah preparing coffee in her kitchen. She turned on the local news, letting it play in the background as she cooked breakfast. But the words coming from the television made her stop cold. A reporter stood in front of yellow crime scene tape, describing a series of murders that had shaken the nearby towns. 4 young women had been found in different locations over the last 3 months, all killed in eerily similar ways. Each victim had a red string tied tightly around her wrist, a detail the police had only now decided to release. Sarah's heart raced. She couldn't say why, but the mention of that red string clung to her thoughts. It reminded her of something small, something she'd seen in passing, a spool of red string poking out of Ethan's backpack a week ago. She had assumed it was for a school project or maybe his art supplies. Now, the memory made her skin crawl. The news continued, showing a grainy composite sketch of the suspect. It wasn't clear, just a man with a hoodie, head slightly down, but something about the posture felt familiar. She shook the thought away, scolding herself for even entertaining the idea. Sarah spent the rest of the day trying to distract herself, scrubbing already clean counters, folding clothes, rereading old books. But no matter what she did, she couldn't get that red string out of her mind. It was too specific, too strange. And why had Ethan suddenly dropped out without explanation? Still, she clung to reason. Her son couldn't be involved in something like that. He was quiet, yes. Distant, maybe. But a killer? No. She refused to believe it. Not yet. The days grew heavier. Sarah tried to dismiss her thoughts, but suspicion crept in like a slow leak she couldn't stop. She began noticing more small things that didn't add up. Ethan kept his bedroom door locked at all times, even when he wasn't home. When she asked what he was working on, he gave vague answers, saying he was just sorting things out. His phone was always on silent, and he never left it unattended. Sarah felt like a stranger in her own home, walking on eggshells around her son. One afternoon, while cleaning the laundry, she noticed a faint stain on one of Ethan's jackets. It looked like blood. She told herself it must have been paint, maybe from one of his old art projects. But the unease refused to leave her. That night, while Ethan was asleep, Sarah found the old set of keys she had once kept for emergencies. Her hands shook as she unlocked the drawer in his desk. Inside, everything was arranged too carefully, too deliberately. Newspaper articles about the murders were stacked in chronological order. Each had been highlighted, underlined, and annotated in Ethan's handwriting. Alongside them were small plastic bags, each containing items Sarah couldn't explain. Pieces of jewelry, torn fabric, even a single hair tie with a pink charm. At the bottom of the drawer lay a glove with dark, dried stains. Sarah stood frozen. Her mind raced to make sense of what she was seeing. Maybe he was researching something. Maybe it was a horrible misunderstanding. She placed everything back exactly as she had found it and locked the drawer again. That night, she lay in bed wide awake, listening to the quiet hum of the house, wondering if she truly knew the person sleeping just down the hall. Sarah no longer felt safe in her own home. Every creak of the floorboards, every closing door, sent a chill through her. She smiled when Ethan looked at her, cooked his favorite meals, and pretended everything was fine. But behind that calm face was a mother unraveling. She began watching his movements more closely, noting when he left, how long he was gone, what he took with him. There was a pattern forming, one she didn't want to believe. One night, around midnight, Ethan quietly slipped out the front door. Sarah followed minutes later, staying far behind. She trailed his car down back roads until he turned onto a dirt path leading deep into the woods. He parked beside an old barn, its roof half collapsed and windows broken. Sarah parked farther away, heart pounding, and waited. Ethan disappeared inside and didn't come out for hours. Eventually, his car pulled away and vanished into the dark. When she was sure he was gone, Sarah stepped out and approached the barn. The door creaked open, revealing a space that felt colder than the night air. What she saw inside made her knees weaken. One wall was covered in photos, portraits of the victims from the news, candid shots, and surveillance stills. Red string connected the images like a web. Beneath them were maps, notes, and a list of towns with dates scribbled beside them. A small table held more trophies, rings, earrings, even a torn scarf. The smell of decay lingered in the air. Sarah stumbled out, breath caught in her throat. It was no longer a question. She didn't need proof or confession. She knew. Her son wasn't just troubled or misunderstood. He was the killer. And now, she had to decide what to do with that truth. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall, the weight of her discovery pressing down like a stone on her chest. Her hands trembled as she held her phone, hovering over the emergency number again and again. But every time, her thumb stopped short. Turning in her own son felt like betrayal, yet letting him continue meant more people could die. She thought of the victims' faces on the barn wall. Young women with lives ahead of them, lives Ethan had taken. By morning, her mind was made up. She wouldn't give her name. She would stay anonymous. Through an online tip form, she submitted everything she had seen, the barn's location, what was inside, and the dates she remembered Ethan leaving the house. To protect herself, she used a voice distortion app to follow up with a call. Her voice sounded hollow, robotic. She gave no personal details and hung up as soon as she finished. That evening, the news broke. Police had raided an abandoned barn outside Crescent Falls, discovering what they called a trophy room belonging to the wanted killer. Reporters swarmed the area. The police chief confirmed that a reliable anonymous tip had led them there. Authorities praised the unknown source for their courage. Ethan sat silently on the couch, watching the news with unreadable eyes. He made no comment, no movement. He didn't seem surprised. Sarah glanced at him from the kitchen, heart pounding. Had he guessed it was her? Did he already know? She stayed quiet, pretending to focus on dishes, while inside, her thoughts raced. She had done the right thing. She had stopped him. But Ethan was still here, just a few feet away. And that meant it wasn't over. Not yet. The fear became constant. Every sound in the house made Sarah flinch. She kept the front door locked, even when she was inside. Nights were the worst. Long hours of silence broken only by the sound of Ethan moving around in his room. He rarely spoke now, and when he did, his words were cold, flat. He watched her more closely, like he knew something had changed. She wondered if he had noticed the keys out of place, the drawers slightly shifted, the way her hands shook when she poured coffee. Then, one evening, she came home from the grocery store and felt it instantly. Ethan was gone. His car wasn't in the driveway. His shoes were missing. She ran to his room. It was clean, too clean. The drawer she had once unlocked was now completely empty. On his desk lay a single piece of paper. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. There were just 6 words written on it. I knew you'd find out. Her knees buckled. She sank to the floor, holding the note like it might explain everything. But it didn't. It only confirmed what she feared most. Ethan knew. He knew she had been in the barn. He knew she had turned him in. And now he was gone. Police were notified immediately, but by the time they searched the area, Ethan had vanished. His car was found abandoned miles away with no signs of where he went. They added his name to the federal wanted list and warned the public he was dangerous and likely to flee across state lines. Sarah stood by the window that night, staring into the darkness. Her son was no longer hiding in plain sight. Now he was truly out there, silent, clever, and still in control. Months passed, but the fear never left. Sarah's days became quiet, hollow routines. Working, returning home, locking every door, checking over her shoulder. Ethan was still missing. Authorities had searched several states, following tips that led nowhere. His name and photo were broadcast on national news, his face etched into the collective memory of a terrified public. Sarah watched each update in silence, hoping for a capture, dreading what might happen if he appeared again. Then, a break in the case changed everything. A man was caught in another state while attempting to abduct a young woman. His vehicle held evidence linking him to at least 3 of the murders originally thought to be Ethan's. The media exploded. Headlines suggested they had finally found the Crescent Falls killer. He confessed to his crimes in detail, but insisted he hadn't killed all the victims. Some, he said, were already dead before he arrived at the scenes. He admitted to copying the original killer's red string signature to confuse investigators. DNA confirmed he was telling the truth. He was a murderer, but not the first one. Sarah felt a new kind of horror settle in. Ethan wasn't just suspected anymore. He was the origin. The man who had been caught had mimicked him, trying to hide behind his shadow. But Ethan's work was separate. It was earlier. It was colder. And it was still ongoing. A fresh murder appeared weeks later, in a different state. Same pattern. Same red string. The signature hadn't changed. Authorities confirmed it matched the original killer's methods, not the copycats. Sarah stared at the report, numb. Her son was still alive, still killing, and still one step ahead. She had tried to stop him once. Now, she could only wait and wonder when he'd return. It had been 5 months since Ethan vanished. Sarah had moved, changed her phone number, and tried to rebuild her life in another town. But no matter where she went, the fear followed. Then one morning, she opened her mailbox and froze. Inside was a plain white envelope with no return address. Her name was written in neat, familiar handwriting. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a short letter, no greeting, no date, just a few sentences. Ethan's handwriting was unmistakable. He wrote that he understood why she did what she did. He said he wasn't angry. He said he'd been close. Closer than she thought. At the bottom of the letter were 6 words. You still don't really know me. Sarah turned the letter over. Nothing. She took it to the police. They ran tests and confirmed it was real. It had been mailed from another state, but that didn't mean much. Ethan could have sent it from anywhere, or had someone else do it. A week later, a second letter arrived. This time, no words, only a photo. It was a grainy image of Sarah, standing in her new front yard, watering her plants. It had been taken from across the street. Panic set in. Police increased patrols around her home, and she installed security cameras. But the damage was already done. Ethan had found her. He knew where she was, and he wanted her to know that. Sarah stopped sleeping. Every knock at the door made her flinch. Every shadow on the street felt like him. She realized now that this wasn't just about guilt or grief. It was about survival. Ethan wasn't gone. He was watching, and he was just getting started. Nearly a year had passed. Sarah was a different person, older, quieter, always on edge. She spoke to no one except her therapist and the occasional detective who still checked in. She lived alone and rarely left her house. But the story hadn't ended. A hiker in Oregon stumbled upon a shallow grave just off a trail. Inside were bones, clothing, and a bracelet tied with red string. The details matched Ethan's past killings. Forensic testing confirmed it. Same killer, same pattern. Sarah didn't even flinch when she heard the news. She already knew. The media picked up the case again. Sarah agreed to one interview. She spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. She described Ethan as a bright, kind child, thoughtful, artistic, never violent. But as she looked back, she realized the signs had always been there. The distant stare, the obsessive habits, the drawings he tore up before anyone could see. There was one moment she'd never forgotten. When Ethan was 9, a neighborhood cat went missing. Days later, She found Ethan burying something in the woods. He said it was just trash. She never asked again. In the interview's final minutes, the host asked Sarah if she believed her son would ever stop. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I think he's waiting. For something. Maybe for me to give up looking. Maybe for one last goodbye." She paused, then added, "But I won't stop watching the door. Because I know, when he comes back, it won't be to say sorry." The screen faded to black, but her words echoed long after. Some stories don't end. They wait in the shadows, wearing a familiar face.